The Knicks are now leading the Spurs 2-1 in the NBA Finals after suffering their first loss in 46 days last night. But the game was memorable for reasons beyond what was happening on the court. So President Trump became the first sitting U.S. president to attend the NBA Finals. His presence earned a mixed reaction from the crowd. This is what happened when he appeared on the Jumbotron during the national anthem. After the game, the president turned his focus to the war in the Middle East, telling reporters he was close to a peace deal with Iran and Israel.
They were going back and forth, and now they both agreed through me to stop. And we're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal that will not allow in any way, shape, or form nuclear weapons, etc. And the Strait will open up right away. It'll open up immediately upon signing, which could be in 2 or 3 days.
Let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez. So, Nancy, I think we've heard this a lot from the president, that we're close to a deal and then things back away. What's your read on if this time is any different?
I think we'll just have to wait 2 or 3 days, Kelly, because the president has said that so many times. He said we're days away, we're less than a week away, it could happen tomorrow, and it hasn't happened. And we haven't heard any indications from other U.S. officials that they, like the president, believe that they are 2 to 3 days away from a final deal. In fact, what we've heard in recent days from the Secretary of State, for example, is that he's very hopeful about a diplomatic solution, but that he's not going to put a timeline on it. So the reality is that we frequently hear these optimistic predictions from the President of the United States, and we'll just have to wait and see if he's right this time.
Earlier on CBS Morning News, Errol Barnett spoke with former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, about the war, Nancy. He says the U.S. and Israel initially had 5 objectives to end this war, but now they're just focusing on one. I want to play a bit of that.
They're focusing almost exclusively on the nuclear issue. And that is going to be a challenge for the state of Israel, certainly, because we're going to continue to face those proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthi rebels who fired a rocket at Tel Aviv just yesterday. So Israel's going to say, most likely, if the United States reaches an agreement with Iran, that agreement cannot tie Israel's hands, and Israel's going to have to continue to do what it needs to do to defend itself.
And that seems to be the consensus amongst many geopolitical strategists and analysts, Nancy, that Israel will have to do what they think is in the best interest of its people. And that may differ from what the United States wants to do. And I think for President Trump, at this point, he just wants to wrap this war up. But the Israelis see a larger existential threat to their existence.
Right. I think the reality is that the Israeli goals and the U.S. goals in this war were never fully aligned. Yes, there was overlap. Yes, of course, the Israelis and the Americans want to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. But, for example, let's take ballistic weapons, which is something that was, in the original set of goals. Obviously, that's a much bigger concern for Israel, which is within striking range of a ballistic weapon from Iran, and the U.S., which isn't. And furthermore, I think the reason that the nuclear issue has become so front and center for President Trump is because this war ended up lasting so much longer than he predicted and costing so much money. And so as a means of making the case to the American people that all of this was worth it, he chose to go with the argument that he thought would be most resonant, which was that he did all of this to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which is potentially, if that were to happen, would be something that could put American lives at risk.
All right, Nancy Cortez, appreciate it.
For more on the situation in the Middle East, we're joined by CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Dagan in Tel Aviv. So, Charlie, we were talking earlier in the last hour. We talked about that helicopter crash in the Strait of Hormuz and the operation to save the pilots. What are we learning about how they are doing at this point?
Yeah, so Vlad, as we discussed, this is the first time that the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy in this case, has deployed an unmanned drone surface vehicle, USV as they call it, in order to rescue these 2 individuals. And what's important here is, first of all, aside from it being the first time it was used, it was deployed out of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. And that was under the command of Bradley Cooper, not Bradley, but Brad Cooper, who is now the commander of Central Command, part of this area of responsibility. So it was kind of like his baby and his project. But then you have to ask yourself, well, why would you put a drone into a situation where you really want to have a manned aerial rescue, which is the more conservative way of trying to pick up individuals who may have gone down, in this case, in an Apache helicopter. I'm just speculating here, but you do not want to put other service members at risk when you're trying to rescue service members. So as far as Central Command is concerned, they say this happened off the coast of Oman. But the coast of Oman is also the Strait of Hormuz, depending on where we are geographically. They don't want to share a lot of information about what kind of drone was used. They don't want to give that sort of signature or that profile or exactly where it happened. But we do know that it was 2 hours from the event, or the incident as they call it, to the rescue. And the two individuals, you have a pilot and a gunner. These Apache helicopters, they sit on top of one another, as it were. So the pilot's in front, the gunner's in the back, the other way around. And they have been rescued, and they're in stable condition. And this is the first time in history that a drone has been used. So it's important to note that. Why was a drone used? The fact that a drone was used, I mean, it's pretty impressive that they have developed that capacity to put a drone into the water in order to rescue crew members. But again, you always have to ask yourself, why would you put a drone in place where you have sea helicopters that are deployed from aircraft carriers or amphibious, or even on the Gulf of Oman, where there is a U.S. military presence there? And why would you send a drone instead? But again, happy ending. These two crew members have been rescued. Took about 2 hours, and they are in stable condition. We don't know yet whether they came down because of enemy gunfire or mechanical malfunction or pilot error or whatever, but that's where we are right now. The investigation is ongoing.
Yeah, it's an interesting question about the drone, but obviously, at the end of the day, happy that they are okay. I want to switch gears slightly. Both Israel and Iran say they've halted military operations following yesterday's attacks. What's the situation on the ground right now?
It's been quiet here, Kelly, and that is a positive step forward, not just obviously for the people of Israel, because 24 hours ago, they canceled school around here. The people weren't going to work. The streets were empty again. It was kind of reminiscent of the full-scale battle that we saw between Israel and Iran and the United States back in April. We had air raid sirens going on, people scrambling for shelters. That hasn't been the case. Of course, things are still on a knife edge, but there hasn't been this sort of what the military likes to call kinetic. There hasn't been Iran bombing Israel or the other way around. And it was partly because President Trump asked both sides, actually demanded both sides, stop fighting. They had traded salvos. Israel had hit areas in southern Beirut, Hezbollah targets, purportedly Hezbollah targets. That's what triggered the retaliation from Iran. And I can tell you, we went up north. We were there when that happened, and we were told to get out of that region quickly. A lot of people who said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, this is what we do." And I said, "What are you doing here?" This is where we live. So that's where you are in that sort of environment. So it was pummeled maybe 48 hours ago. But as far as we know, there haven't been a sort of return to those kind of hostilities. And that's really important. You know, this is between Israel and Iran, but it's also between the United States and Iran. So if Israel is fighting and sending airstrikes or getting hit by Iranian ballistic missiles, that obviously has an impact on U.S. and Iran peace deals going forward.
All right, Charlie Daggett reporting from Tel Aviv. Thank you.